pleased with, but we're going to make that pitch today. We will have one of our league members give the pros and cons for Prop 1, which is the only measure on the ballot in March. And I'll let Dee talk about what the pros and cons are and how the league approaches it, etc. And then the third part of the program, and since many of you here are not league members, and thank you so much for being here, I think there's an interest in the Prop 1 discussion, where we will have different perspectives on Prop 1, and there will be time after each of the presentations, each of the segments of the program today for you to ask questions. So, I'll get started. This program is a result of the realization that many people overlook the primary election for a number of reasons. Some think the only important election is a general election, since that's where final decisions are made. What our first panel will talk about today is how and why the primary is important. First, because some offices, such as the Stockton Mayor and City Council members and the Board of Supervisors, could be elected in the primary. Not all races will be decided, since several of them have many candidates, making it difficult for one person to receive the required 50% plus one votes to be elected. But some candidates will likely be elected in March, and your vote is important. Even if a race is not decided in the primary, and the state legislative offices will not be, it is important to get the best candidates to the general election to give voters the strongest options for their representation. Today's first panel will address these issues. I want to thank our three panelists: former Stockton City Council member Albert Holman, former San Joaquin County Supervisor Chuck Wynn, and State Senator Susan Talamantes Eggman. These are very accomplished public servants, and I appreciate their being here with us this morning. I'm going to read the introductions to all three of them and then turn the panel over to them. We'll start with Albert Holman. Albert was born in Stockton and graduated from Edison High School. He attended Cal Poly and completed his education at the University of the Pacific. In 1971, he began his 20-year tenure as a San Joaquin County Deputy Sheriff. As a deputy, he became a graduate of the National FBI Academy, among the approximately only 10% of law enforcement officers with this distinction. Following his time in the Sheriff's Department, he spent 14 years as an investigator for the District Attorney's Office, his last 5 years in that office as Chief Investigator, the first African American to hold that office in California. Continuing his service to the community, Albert was appointed to the Stockton City Council in 2009 and went on to be elected and re-elected to that office, serving 2 full terms. He served on myriad committees, including ones focused on water issues. He served during one of the most difficult periods in Stockton's history, Stockton's bankruptcy. Albert has continued his career of public service in many ways, including as a member of the Sunrise Rotary, and he is about to embark on his second term as president of that club. Albert has a wide range of experience in the issues facing Stockton and the rest of our county. After Albert, we will hear from Chuck Wynn. Chuck was born and raised in the Central Valley. He served as a member of the California Highway Patrol for over 37 years, including commanding the Modesto area office for 15 years. He was a member of the Ripon City Council for 12 years, serving on a variety of boards and committees representing the city and the county. In 2014, Chuck was elected to the San Joaquin County Board of Supervisors, where he served on about 25 boards, commissions, and committees that range from agriculture and the airport to the zoo. Some of the most critical assignments were those that involved water, homelessness, healthcare, and transportation. He has a bachelor's degree from Chapman University in organizational leadership, which led him to teach criminal justice classes at 3 private colleges for 9 years after his retirement from the CHP. On July 1st, 2024, he will begin a new challenge as the San Joaquin County Board of Education trustee representing Area 1. And Senator Susan Talamantes Eggman. Senator Eggman grew up in her family's small almond orchard and apiary in Turlock. She joined the U.S. Army out of high school and served 4 years as a medic. She attended California State University, Stanislaus, where she completed a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in social work. She worked as a mental health provider and medical social worker before completing her PhD at Portland State University. Before beginning her political career, she was a professor of social work at Sacramento State University. Susan served on the Stockton City Council, the first Latina elected to that office, from 2006 to 2012. She served in the State Assembly from December 2012 to November 2020, and has since served in the State Senate, where her term will end this December. Susan is the current chair of the California Legislative LGBT Caucus. While in the Assembly, Susan authored the landmark end-of-life option legislation. Her work as a hospice social worker and her doctoral research into end-of-life experiences of Latino families in the Central Valley underlay her commitment to allow terminally ill patients to legally opt to control their end-of-life decisions. Susan currently serves as the chair of the Senate Health Committee and is a member of many Senate committees. Most recently, she authored Senate Bill 326, which collectively with the accompanying Assembly Bill 531 is meant to transform the California mental health and substance use disorder treatment system. You will learn more about that legislation in the third part of this program. So I'm going to turn this over to Elbert.
Thank you very much. I just first of all want to thank and acknowledge the League of Women Voters for putting this together. This is very important. I think that we are in a situation now in the United States of America where our democracy is really in jeopardy. And I think that it is prudent upon each of us, both locally and nationally, that we have forums like this so that people can be educated on the political process and that we can vote intelligently and not just vote for people because they're tall, short, fat, my brother's sister, my mama's baby, you know, those kinds of things, you know, and that's how we evaluate our legislators. And so I'm happy for this, and I'm happy to be a part of this. I get to see two of my colleagues that I've worked with over the years. Susan is actually one of the reasons that I'm actually in politics, because she was part of the council that voted me in to finish the term of Steve Vestalaritas, who was went on to the Board of Supervisors. So she did this to me. But I like, once again, I'm happy to be here today. And you know, talking about primary elections are very, very important. Because just as Colleen said, a person can be elected in the primary, 50% plus one, that person can be elected and take over the spot. So if they have a coalition that is, you know, prudent and out there and talking to people, and some of us are, listen, I'm not talking about the choir in here, but some of us are lazy. We don't go out and vote in the primary election because they think, well, you know, it doesn't really matter. Someone can be elected that you really don't want to represent you as you go forward. So it's very, very important, but not only to vote in the election, but also to study who is running. There are people that I get phone calls today. Who are we voting for? Well, I know who I'm voting for. You know, even, and I served over 10 years with Susan and Chuck. I think we think the same alike, but there have been issues that we don't agree on. And we just agree to disagree and we move forward, but we get things done. So just because I voted for somebody doesn't mean that that's the person that should be, you would want to represent you in whatever capacity you're voting on. So you have to be prudent, and you have to peel back that, I call it peel back that onion, to look and see just who they really are. Sometimes we vote for people that, because I've known their family for many, many years, and they're a member of the family, they have to be good. That's not true. You can find that there are some incompetent people that get elected to office. I can tell you, and I don't know if Susan has had this, or Chuck has had this, When we sit on the council, Stockton is a big city. Stockton is the 11th largest city in the state of California. It's the 62nd or 67th largest city in the United States. We're not just a mom and pop. There are a lot of huge issues that affect the citizens in the city of Stockton. And we get a lot of information. Our staff, and we have a great staff here in the city of Stockton. They do a lot of work and provide us with the necessary information that we need to make intelligent decisions as to where we should go with various matters. I've seen council members not even open their packet. They're opening it on the dais as we're getting ready to vote on the issue. And these are people that we have elected. But if we did our homework, we could have known more about that person and how they operate. But, you know, and I'm not faulting anybody, because our society has gotten to the point now where we're too busy with the business of living. We got kids, we got bills, we got jobs, we have all of these things, and we don't want one more thing on our plate to go and do research on somebody that's running for office. We'd rather call me or call you, you're a friend of mine, I trust your judgment, who we voting for, and then you vote. That is not the way we should be voting today. We should peel back that and find out who these people are. And there's information out there. If you get a chance, go to a forum, a political forum, listen to what they have to say. At least read some of the literature that comes out in reference to who is running, and then make it an intelligent. It's okay to talk to different people, but don't let that be your lone evaluation of the person that is running, and vote on that aspect. I could tell you, in the city of Stockton, when Susan and I sat on the council, we had the toughest situation that I think in my entire life. I worked in law enforcement for 34 years. I haven't had anything that kept me up at night like our bankruptcy. And I can tell you that I was glad for the council that we had in place at that time, because as I look now, I don't know if we would have made it through that situation. We didn't all agree at first, but we listened to the data, we listened to the experts, we asked our tough questions, we went back and forth, but we came out 7-0 votes every time a critical vote was taking place. I don't think we get that today. And as a result, our city was saved. We were this close to losing our city. A lot of people don't realize that. We were this close for losing control of our city. We were seriously underwater. But it was because competent people were on the council, people that were willing to study the issues. They weren't opening their packet on the dais. They were studying the issues. They were asking questions. They were doing their duty. And as a result, we saved our city. Oh, it was tough, but we saved our city. And that was the important thing. And so you have to pay attention to what's going on now. Some other people, I had I think cops don't make good politicians. Right, Chuck? We can serve because we do the right thing, but we're not politicians. All right. And when I came to the city council, I wasn't a politician. Matter of fact, I didn't even want to get involved. But thanks to Donna Brown, and thanks to Colin Foster, and other people that urged me, and Susan and that council, I got involved. And I'm glad I did, because I never worked with a better group of people who total intention was to improve the quality of life in our city. They weren't in it for themselves. They weren't in it to take photographs and kiss babies and ribbon cuttings. Every one of them was dedicated to studying the data, to studying their packets, and asking questions, and then making an intelligent vote. So I urge you to make sure that in this coming election, because this one here is so important, that you pay attention to who's running, pay attention to who they are, and vote intelligently.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for holding this forum. Every bit of information that you can provide to the voting and actually non-voting residents is important. I also want to say that working with Albert, as he says, the last 10 years when I was City Council and Board of Supervisors, and certainly with Susan when she was in the Assembly and the Senate, you can't find two better individuals to represent their constituents than these two. I say that from the standpoint that, for example, Susan was a stalwart for water issues for San Joaquin County, which is probably one of the most important issues facing us, since agriculture is our #1 economic engine. But the other part of it is that in 20 years as an elected official, actually 3 years on the Planning Commission, as Albert said, I had the opportunity to watch my peers not only in the City Council and the Board of Supervisors, but I also, because of actually it was about 30 different boards, committees, and commissions I served on the Board of Supervisors, watching a whole range of City Council members, supervisors, elected officials, and to be honest, a good portion of them, maybe the majority of them, or like Albert said, would open the packet, and I had a City Council member in a meeting walking down to the dais and opening his packet just before the meeting, or in the meeting itself, ask a question that was on the second page of the staff report. And so my point is that unfortunately there are a lot of individuals that represent us that really aren't prepared, and unfortunately are more swayed by special interests than their constituents. One of the things that I focused on and tried to do as a representative both on City Council and all the committees and certainly the Board of Supervisors is that, you know, there are, everybody's an elected official, but there are politicians and there are representatives. Years ago they used to call them statesmen, stateswomen, and these are individuals who actually represented their constituents by making decisions that maybe not be beneficial for their political future, but made decisions based upon what was best for the people who elected them to that office. I had occasion, for example, and also, and you're all aware of the battles that are going on both nationally in the state and certainly locally in regards to politics and some of those things. One of the things that I, starting way back with the Planning Commission, first of all, I found that with 3 votes you can rule the world. And that's important because you have to work with your peers to get things done. And my philosophy from the very beginning was basically to govern. We can all be ideologues, but ideologues don't get much done. And so as I went through the years, and I got a ton of incidents, but I remember one when I was on the Council of Governments, which probably distributes hundreds of millions of dollars throughout the county on transportation projects. And back in 2014, we were adopting the 2014 Regional Transportation Plan, which went out to 2040. And so there's 12 members representing the 7 cities, the Board of Supervisors, et cetera. And so we were voting on it, and the vote was 10-2. The 2, myself, and Moses Zapian, who is a representative from the city of Stockton. And so I didn't have a chance at the meeting, but the next meeting I went up to him and I told him that I really appreciated him taking that stand for his constituents in the city of Stockton, who are different than the constituents in the city of Ripon. And when we talked, he voted against it because it wasn't progressive enough, and I voted against it because it was too progressive. But my point is that, as Albert said, you know, for example, a good friend of mine, Kathy Miller, who's on Board of Supervisors, and I worked with Kathy on city council when we were on Ripon and she was on Stockton. Kathy was the epitome of a public servant, of a representative. And the thing that I've garnered over the years, two qualities I look for in a candidate. First is integrity, and second is work ethic. And the reason I say that is because I've seen so many individuals who represent you, or me, who don't do their job. On the Board of Supervisors, I served with 8 other supervisors. Only 3 of those out of the 8, actually, in my opinion, did their job. It is not uncommon, for example, for a supervisor, and sometimes city council, but supervisor to have their chief of staff basically attend the meetings, do the research on the staff reports, etc. And at the Board of Supervisors, a staff report for one meeting could be as many as 4,000 pages. And so my point is, and thank God for computers, because I would go through basically the whole package, and I would pick those individual items that were important, because a lot of them are consent items, etc. But my point is that as a supervisor, it is a job of 60 to 80 hours a week every week. It is not 8 to 5. I was asked a question. I was in a meeting at one night, and because I was there, the question was, how many meetings do you go at night? And I thought, I don't know. So I went, this is back in 2019. So I went back and I counted from January to June 30th of 2019. I'd attended 138 meetings at night. Now, understand, some of those nights I had 2 meetings, one after the other, like after COG, and then I went to a municipal advisory council. My point isn't that I worked very hard, but my point is, in those meetings, I had a tremendous opportunity to talk to people and listen to their concerns and answer questions and provide information and receive information. So when I voted at the board level, I had the opportunity to know basically what my constituents wanted and what their position was, which was a tremendous benefit to me. And so I believe that an individual office shouldn't be, for example, what I've sat next to, because we all had computers to use to look up the staff reports, etc. But have a peer who had it literally, I mean, we're talking about a stack of papers maybe a foot high, printed out with tabs and highlighting and notes in the margin. And the fact of the matter is, I knew that representative did not read that report. They were given that by somebody else, and they read it. And what bothered me was, when we had discussions after the staff presentation, sometimes a member of the public or another supervisor would raise an issue that was not included in that presentation. And so we would talk about it, and we'd go here or there, and we'd get off basically the staff report. Well, individuals sometimes, once because they didn't read the report, they were just provided the highlights, oftentimes they were lost. Literally had no idea, because they didn't understand the issue, because they didn't read the substance of the report. And it bothered me because at the Board of Supervisors level, you're representing approximately 160,000 residents in every district. And so when you talk about, representation, are you truly being represented, as opposed to basically voting with a special interest or lobbyist that called you and gave you a pitch on basically why you should vote a particular way? That's why it's important that you elect individuals who actually work for you and don't work for special interest. Let me share an example, as Helbert talked about briefly. By the way, this is a copy of the board assignments, all 5 supervisors. And if you can see that, actually in 2022, I had 30 different committees, boards that I sat on. And I say that because it was a tremendous experience. It was a great opportunity in regards to representing my constituents, because those particular boards, committees, and commissions made decisions that affected not only my district, but the entire county, and sometimes the region or the state, like the Delta Counties Coalition. So let me give you, and I hate to bore you with facts or numbers, but I'll give you a brief overview of a couple of instances. For example, the primary in March of 2022, the turnout was 28% of voters turned out to vote. In November 2022, it was 46.5, which obviously is better. But the question arises, there's a lot of discussion about whether you should vote by mail or you should vote in person. And the bottom line is that on election day, essentially only 10% of ballots were cast on election day. All the rest were mailed in, which I think is a good thing. It doesn't matter how you vote as long as you vote. Now you go back to March of 2020 and the primary, the turnout was 46%, much improved. Well, obviously, it was a presidential election year, so there was a lot of interest, et cetera, and especially with the candidates who were running for president. You go back to the June primary of 2018, it was 32%. In June of 2014, it was 27%. But here are two races. I just happened to pick, one of them is mine, but the other one was Kathy Miller. She and I were elected in the same year. Kathy and her opponent were the only two candidates. And essentially, Kathy won because 50% plus one vote gets you the office. So obviously she won. In that particular election, in that particular district, only 26% of the registered voters turned out to vote. And the total vote was 15,000 votes for almost 60,000 registered voters. So you can see the minimal amount of individuals who made that decision. She was a great supervisor. I think that was the right choice. In the same particular year, I was also running in the primary, and I had two opponents, so obviously somebody was going to have to get 50%, which we didn't. And so the turnout in that particular race was, in my district, District 4, was 36%, which is obviously higher. So because none of us got 50%, we went to the general election. And in the general election in November, in my district, for example, there were over 30,896 votes cast, of which I was fortunate to get over 16,000. The reason I bring that number up is the 16,000 votes I got for myself, as opposed to my opponent. And by the way, my two opponents, we had a great time on the campaign trail. We had about 40 different candidate forums, et cetera. And one of my opponents couldn't show up, so I represented him in the forum and answered questions for him. And I bring that up because politics does not have to be contentious. I mean, and so we had, and I think a lot of both those opponents. But anyway, the reason I bring that 16,000 up is that 16,000 was more than the 15,000 that got Kathy Miller elected in that election. And my point is that turnout is critical in regards to the future of not only you, but your neighbor, et cetera. And without that participation, you may end up with an individual who maybe you don't agree with, et cetera. It touched upon the law enforcement. Actually, I think to some degree law enforcement is better prepares you for politics because for 37 years, I took a lot of abuse. I mean, whether it be when I was on patrol, I worked my patrol in LA as an officer sergeant. And I say that because in my first assignment, we had 5 patrol areas because there are county pockets within the city, for example, Los Angeles. So I had West Hollywood, I had Baldwin Hills, Playa del Rey, Lenox, and Watts, okay? So a very diverse group of constituents, so to speak, that you patrol for. Interestingly enough, the area I liked to work most was Watts. And I say that because I had less hassle, I had less conflict, I had less physical resistance, I had less of everything. And I found also because periodically I'd stop and see somebody out in their yard, and I just stop by and say hello or whatever. But those individuals in that area, they wanted the same thing everybody else does. The families, they wanted their children to get an education, they wanted them to be employed, to have a family, to buy a home, etc. And that's what they wanted. And frankly, because we wear different uniforms in LAPD or the Sheriff's Department, which patrols the area, at times I would get hailed down by an individual neighbor because there was something going on, and they wanted the police officer, so I take care of it. My point is, they didn't care what kind of uniform you wore, they just wanted somebody to protect them, and that's the bottom line. But again, what Albert says is true, because, let's face it, over time, I won't say you become immune, but you know how to handle attacks, verbally or physically, which happens occasionally. So, meaning that was a good preparation for being in politics. Also, the other part of it is, I've always felt, for example, I'll go back to Kathy, we served on COG together, and oftentimes we voted differently. And the reason is the residents of the city of Stockton are different than my residents out in the county, especially on some like ACE and some other issues. I never faulted her, and she never faulted me, because we knew that actually we were on opposite ends of the political spectrum, but I had a tremendous amount of respect for her because she did her job in regard to representing her constituents. That's what you look for. So anyway, real quickly, we talked about the non-voter. There were several studies done. I'll just break it down into a couple of key issues. A lot of people don't vote because, and I'll read this from a particular study that I looked at, is that the majority of voters that don't vote believe that their vote makes no difference, because no matter who gets elected, it's going to be the same all the time. They also believe that, for example, that the media is out to make money, and their coverage isn't necessarily as accurate as it should be. A lot of times they vote or don't vote because they're reacting or rebelling to the political parties they're going. A lot of them vote because they don't like any of the candidates that are running. After the 28%, I went to several meetings, and I just asked the question as here, why didn't you vote? And most of them said, well, I didn't know who to vote for. Or the other comment probably mostly used is, I didn't like any of them. And that's sad, because when you look at this country, you look at the state, you look at the city, the cities, there are a lot of great people that would make a fantastic representative for you, but they don't run. And why don't they run? Well, a lot of them because they have jobs, and with the probably exception of board of supervisors, most of them don't pay enough to work full time. But more importantly, in this climate, why would you want to be a candidate or be in office and get the abuse that most politicians get? And I'm not saying it's undeserved. I'm just saying that it happens. And so it's not necessarily something that you would look forward to, especially in a campaign where you're getting attacked by your opponents, and then if you get elected, you're getting attacked by your constituents. So it's not something that most people look forward to. I'll finish on one of the things that Albert touched upon is the bankruptcy in Stockton. Well, I was on city council, and we were obviously going through a downturn financially also. Fortunately, we had built up a reserve. And I remember one council meeting, one of my fellow council members, his solution to our problem, because of the decrease in revenues, was that we ought to reduce all employees' pay by 25%, automatically. Well, first of all, and he had more seniority than I did, but he didn't understand collective bargaining. He didn't have a clue, and he'd been on the council at least 8 years at that time. And so my comment back to him was, well, you know, we have a reserve that we can cover our losses or our deficit. And he says, well, that's for a rainy day. I said, it's raining. We're in a storm. Anyway, so sometimes you hear from individuals that don't, like a better term, don't have a clue. And that's the sad part, because they represent you, and they vote based upon what they think you want, maybe not most of the time, but that's the problem. And so those are some issues that I'm concerned about, and also to the non-voter, and I would add this. One of the things I read in regards to stats non-voters, oftentimes non-voters won't vote because of who they're surrounded by. Family, friends, coworkers, etc. And so this is obviously talking to the choir, but understand that a lot of voters are disengaged because, one, they don't know the issues, nobody talks to them, nobody shares with them, nobody goes up to them and said, did you read the paper about what this city council member or whatever did? Just engage, and they probably don't know. But my point is if you can at least kind of crack open the door to let them understand that there is a realization that the people who are elected for them represent them, and the decisions they make affect them personally, not only the quality of life, but certainly their pocketbook or their taxes. And those are things that are important in regards to making sure that as elected officials progress, that they vote or represent the people who put them in office. That's the key. And again, I'm not, yes, I belong to a political party, but as a supervisor and actually a city council, I wasn't concerned about politics. I was concerned about governing and making sure that the city or the county improved the quality of life for the residents there. And that's the bottom line, and I wish more individuals in office took that approach. And when I say those things, I'm not criticizing or demeaning or whatever. It's just an observation. It's for what I've seen. And again, any of you here, obviously because you're interested, would be interested in not just running for office, but participating in a commission or a committee with the city or the county or whatever, please apply. Because I think county has like 64 different boards, committees, and commissions. And they're made up of individuals like you. And they provide recommendations to the board. And my approach, at least from the Board of Supervisors, is that you all oftentimes know better than we all as elected officials because you're living it on a day-to-day basis. And that's really important in regards to individuals voting for your future, is being told, and I know at board meetings and council meetings, etc., there are individuals who got up and just attacked us, etc. But this is a free country. You have the opportunity to speak your mind. And I'll leave it with one last thought. When I was on city council, there was a woman, I hesitate to say her name, but Gaynell Trotter was her name. And she was extremely, and I hate to use labels also, but anyway, she was basically very liberal, but very bright, very knowledgeable, very connected in the community, her family, etc. As a new council member, she taught me to be prepared when I came to the council meeting, because she would ask questions that I don't think many other council members or even staff could answer. And so I really made sure that I read the entire staff report. I understood the issue. I went and talked to staff, et cetera, to make sure they understood. And I ran into Gaynell in Seymour one day, and she said, you and I probably don't agree on very much. I said, yeah, probably not. She says, but I always appreciated that you were consistent in the decisions you made. And I told Gaynell, I said, I appreciate you because you made me a better council member by virtue of your challenges. And so sometimes we say, I don't want to be attacked. Well, sometimes those attacks make you better at what you do. And so by virtue of that, I would encourage all of you to somehow get engaged, and not just by voting, but engage with your neighbors, your friends, your family, to encourage them if they don't vote, to vote because it affects your future and their future. So thank you very much.
Well, hello, everybody. Hello. Is everyone convinced to vote? Good. And I'm thinking this is a group that is going to be convinced to vote no matter what, and I appreciate it because there's not a lot of big groups of people who are going to come out on a Saturday morning to talk about voting a month before the primary. But that to say, the primary is coming, and it's coming the first week in March. I'm a March birthday person, and I never thought my birthday would be GOTV weekend, but now it is. So that's a whole new thing to think about. But I want to talk about the importance of voting because representation matters. I mean, I just think it does. And as I look around in this room right now, well over 50% of you are women. And if you look at your board of supervisors right now, 0% of them are women. It's the same in Stanislaus County, it's the same in Merced County, it's the same in Fresno County, all the way down, I think, to Madera County. So when we think about, right, representation mattering, and you have half the population not invited to the equation, then all of your values may not be represented properly. And I'm not saying gentlemen don't do a fine job, but we need balance. And historically, we haven't had much of that, even in the state of California. When I got elected to the legislature in a body of 120, 40 senators and 80 assembly members, there were approximately, I think, 28 of us were women. That is not equal representation right there. And so my class and many others took a really, so this last term, we just elected 50 women to the body, which is almost parity. And hopefully this year we get 60. And again, not that men don't do a great job, but if you don't have that balance, sometimes that lived experience, like we've talked about, has mattered. I see Kay Rustaller in the crowd, right? The Women's Caucus prioritized childcare slots, right? Has it made a difference, Kay?
Yes.
I would say it has made a huge difference, right? Because that was our thing. We want $1 billion for babies. We want to, if women cannot go back to work if they don't have good quality childcare, and it's got to be quality, right? Otherwise, you're leaving your kids with people that you don't know, that you don't trust, they're not safe, and then you get called into CPS, and then you have a whole cycle that starts happening, right? Now we realize that, and again, as women who have juggled childcare, who have juggled trying to get people, who have juggled trying to pay those bills, understand those kinds of importance. So that's why I think it really matters about who we vote for, what their experiences is, and what they're going to bring to the table. I have served at multiple levels of government, and the same thing is true, right? Not everybody is prepared. Not everybody is created equal. We're all created equal in the eyes of God, but when we get to the dais, sometimes things look a little bit different. And that has to do with your level of preparation and your level of your willingness to learn and to engage, and what issues that you prioritize and what people you prioritize, right? Are you prioritizing those who have the most? Are you prioritizing those that have the least of us, who may need more help, right? Because when we talk about issues around equality, or do we talk about issues of equity? And how do we get everybody up to at least some of the same marks? So representation incredibly matters on school boards, all across the spectrum. And I don't really care for the top two, right? So that happened when the voters voted in term limits. It's my last year in office this year. So I've served 12 years in the state legislature. They also voted in the top two. And the top two says it doesn't matter what party you're in, the people who have the most votes are going to the general election. So in a lot of counties, our county, if you have a couple Democrats and you have a Republican running, in that primary, there's probably going to be that Republican and one Democrat who's going to get out, right? They're the ones who are going to go to November. And in this county, right, you're going to get about 30% around Republican votes, so that person is never going to win the general, for the most part, right? So it's going to be that Democrat that comes out of the primary in March is probably going to be the person who's going to be sworn in for you in November. That make sense? I hope it makes sense, but that's your reality right now. And so you have multiple races that you're looking at, that whoever that candidates who come out of that race are going to be the ones who are going to represent you in November. So it's a precursor, and it comes quickly. And I can't tell you the amount of times I've knocked on doors and people, is today voting day? Is it the only day to vote? Well, it wasn't the only day to vote, but it is now, right? I mean, unless you mail it in on that day. So it matters. I'm pretty sure everybody in here is a voter and will be voting. But I think the issue that you need to get out is, how are you talking to other people, right? How are we reminding other people? How do we use all the forms available to us, whether it's coming here, whether it's your church, whether it's with your kids or your grandkids or whoever? Do they know there's an election coming up? Have they done their research? Do they know the issues that are going to be before all of us in March? It's coming sooner than we think. It's here right now, and again, we have a mayor's race that's gonna take place. Mayors matter, we don't have a strong mayor, but certainly the tenor of how we get along is oftentimes set by that person. So those are the kinds of things you want, like what kind of behavior do you want representing you? I am somebody who thinks that being a centrist is really important because you have to be able to compromise, I think. We now know that we see a lot of folks who think that it's not important to compromise, and compromise is a dirty word, and we all have to be pure on one side or the other. That is not where most people live in life, and most people who need to pay their rent and put gas in their car, that's not the kind of issues that they don't want you to be pure. They want you to do things that make sense, and so that their lives are better. So those are the things to think about, like how are you gonna get more people to vote? How are you gonna get more people to engage? We've seen, right, we hear the things, right? We've seen a lot of civil unrest around equality, about racial issues, right? We've seen a lot of issues going on around reproductive rights and women's right to choose and control our own bodies. And we've seen a lot around voting rights, right? If you think about the trifecta, about how you keep people kind of unengaged and angry and feeling like they don't matter or they're afraid, you go after their bodies, and you go after their people, and you go after their ability to vote, right? So when that's coming, when we see across the country it's getting harder for people to vote and people are taking more steps to prevent people, when we see things popping up on the ballots, oftentimes by a whole male board, legislating what a woman can do with her body in states and in counties across the country, and we see the same thing about voting, we know that the issues are serious. And it's time for us to be as serious as our voting and about our democracy, I think, as those who may intend to take it away from us for reasons that we don't like, right? This is our democracy, this is our government, but we only get to keep this form if we all stay involved and vigilant and engaged in trying to make things better for people, right? Because people only get really angry when they feel like they're missing out. So how do we continue to use elections, use these process to bring more people into the equation so more people feel like this is for us. We're all part of this together. And you don't have to be this way or this way. It's for all of us. So the more we can do that, I think the more turnout we'll have for voting. In Northern California, my good friend Brian Daly, who's a Republican, he ran for governor against Gavin Newsom, right? He represents the whole north area, which is very, very, red, very Republican. He will get over 100,000 votes. Somebody in Los Angeles, when I was in the assembly, who was the speaker, was elected, probably with about 10,000 votes to be a legislator. And then once he got there, he was able to be the head of the whole body. So your vote matters, but the way our system is structured, you have to have the best person that you send to represent you as you can. Right? Because for those millions of, a million people, right? Every one of us represents about 1 million people. For that 1 million people, right, he does a fine job. And for that other 1 million people, oftentimes they're not even aware, because you might have 11 people show up to vote for somebody who is going to be influential statewide. So for every single person in here, right, it's up to us to be the little captain of our own little area and make sure we send our very best and brightest and those with the best hearts and minds to be able to represent us at every level of government, whether that's on a water board, a school board, a city council, a mayor, or at the state level, or even as our president. So I'm glad you're all here today, and I look forward to this conversation ongoing, and thank you.
Could I just add one more thing to
Sure.
Senator said? There's one, she talked about equality. And I think that is so, so important. I don't know how many of you know or don't know, on the Board of Supervisors in the history of San Joaquin County, going back to 1849, 1850, there's never been an African American serve on that board. Every other ethnicity, gender has served on that board that's represented here in San Joaquin County, but not one African American has ever been elected to that body. There has been competent that have run and been interested and put forward, but none ever elected. So I just thought that was ever brought to the table, never having input into what goes on in San Joaquin County. It's important.
Thank you. I want to thank our three panelists. I think they've given us a lot to think about, and there are some themes there. you know, who we elect is important. That's really obvious. You don't always agree with people, but if you vote for people of integrity and thoughtfulness, then you're going to be ahead, regardless of whether you agree with them all the time. Because you're not going to. They're people you love. You're not going to agree with them all the time either. So it's important to look at who's up and cast that vote. We have a really full agenda today, and we have about just 5 minutes. So if there are any burning issues here, that I'll give. Okay, all right. So what I'm going to do is we have a few people who came in after people were seated, and I am so pleased to see all of you here. The League really tries very hard to have programs that are of interest to people, and I've got to tell you, sometimes we're not that successful. and today we are, and because of you. And so I really appreciate that. So we do need to put up a few more chairs. And if we would just kind of stay in place as we put up those. Kay, you had something.
Kay Rustoller, Family Resource Center, and I don't have a question, but I just want to take an opportunity to thank these 3 individuals who have represented our county and our districts at the state level and federal level. And I really appreciated all of what you said about your own preparation and study, and so I didn't want to let the moment go without saying thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Armando Valerio, and for the panel, one specific question. So when I observe city councilmen, board supervisors, legislator, I see groups who come in very vocal, and how do you weigh the vocal group, which may be a small group, compared to all the constituents that you represent in making your decision? Because it seems oftentimes if you're vocal, then you're going to get your agenda moved forward. So if you could talk to that, I'd appreciate it.
Well, no, I was going to say, to be honest with you, based upon my discussions with my constituents in a variety of forums, emails, telephone calls, personal meetings, etc. I always listen to individuals who come to the meetings and express their opinion. But I vote based upon what I've researched, what I know, and what my constituents want me to vote for. So to answer your question, I listen to, and to be honest with you, sometimes I've heard information from the public I wasn't aware of. It might modify my position as far as the outcome, but I vote pretty much based upon what my constituents want. And I'm not persuaded, I won't say I'm not persuaded, but I don't go because there's a full house complaining that I vote for them when I know that there's 160,000 individuals who want a different outcome.
Yeah, we talk to more people than just those that come to the meeting and are very vocal. I mean, we get emails, we get phone calls, we're at the grocery store, we're at church, we're talking to people. I'm one of the few that actually put my personal phone number on my business card. So when you got my business card, you can reach me. You didn't have to go through City Hall, or you can call me. So you talk to people about the issues. Now, there have been times that there's information that has come to the dais, and it happened to me maybe a couple of times. I've done my research, I'm prepared to vote on this thing, and somebody came up to the thing and said something that changed my mind. And I actually changed it on the dais and voted different than I came to the meeting prepared to vote, because they said something that I never thought about before. And it really resonated through all the research that I had, and it changed my mind. And I changed the vote. So we listen to everybody, whether you come to the meeting or I see you walking down the street.
Yeah, I would just concur with that. You know, and again, that's why you want somebody who's going to be prepared and do the research and be able to weigh factors, because it can't just be the loudest person in the room.
Yeah.
But if you're not prepared, that's, you know, you see somebody go, oh, that will be politically expedient. That'll, if I go that, they want me to do this, that will help me with that. You have to be focused, I think, on the issue that you're voting on and the greater demographic.
Like Chuck says, as cops, we're used to people yelling at us.
Yeah, Martha.
Sorry, yeah, so on that comment and on the answers, and I really, really appreciate that you all looked at behind what was, going on besides the loudness of it, but I went to a city council meeting, last spring, I think, I don't remember, Mary, when it was, for my issue, I follow it, but it's like I can't go to, it's like, well, too much effort. And there was a very vocal group of about 15 people that spoke in public comment. And they had an issue, they had their issue that nobody else in the audience was speaking to. And it makes a difference, and it's like, voting is so important, but monitoring these meetings is also important, and getting our voices out and encouraging, when you have an issue, encouraging your neighbors and your friends and your people and groups to go is so important. They need to see us. That's all. Thank you all so much for all you've done.
One other thing too we've done is that there have been people that come, you don't get very much time at the dais to say anything about your issue. If it was something that came out of my district, I would make sure the staff got the phone number and the contact information for that person, that I would contact them after the council meeting or during the week and make contact with them and talk to them personally about their issue.
I just make a quick comment. I had an issue in my district, very controversial, and I got over 300 emails on this issue, and I responded to every one of them. And I only say that because it was so important that they hear from me directly as to my position on this particular issue. And I think both Susan and Albert probably do the same thing. Constituents want feedback. They want to know what you're thinking and what your position is. And the more times you can interact with them, the better off both of you are. And so that's really the key.
But once again, I'd like to thank our panel, and we did put up a few more chairs, so if you don't have one, we have a few here for you. And I'm going to turn the meeting over to Susie Davely, who's going to introduce our lead person who's going to do the pros and cons. And then after that presentation, we will take a break so that you can get a couple goodies at the back, take a couple of breaths, and then we'll conclude with our final panel. But I'm going to turn this over right now to Susie, and thank you, Susan, Jeff, and Albert. I appreciate it very much.